Pretty cheap.
Listen, I'll tell you something.
Pretty cheap set you got here.
When you make an entrance, you really make an entrance.
Well, this is to show. This is all just to show, you know, this whole basic thing that one's good about the house domestically, you know, for those sections of breakfast television.
I tell you something.
That was fun, wasn't it?
If you're like this in the afternoon, I hate to think what you're going to be like early in the morning. It's going to be awful.
I'm going to check our sets. I really am. I'm going to make sure that they're built a little more firmly than this.
You know what it is the fact that you've lost all that weight and you leapt onto the set with great aplomb. I thought that was terrific.
Oh, well, that must have been...
That's made my day. Do you realise that?
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
And the mere fact that you'll be on Breakfast Telly as from 2 weeks' time, does that mean that you're really back in Britain, roots in Britain, here to stay again?
Roots or plants in this case.
Oh, well, that's true.
Well, basically, I never went away, really, you know, in the sense I've always been resident in Britain and all that stuff. It's just I went away but came back all the time, you know, so that, I mean, obviously I will be here a little more consistently and so on, but at the same time, if you've got airline shares, it's not good news, really, you know, because I'll be doing a little less travelling and a little more time here and so on, but a little less yo-yoing backwards and forwards and so on.
I know that obviously you've studied breakfast television in America a great deal, but what are you going to be offering here in Britain?
Well, basically, the important thing is that it's live, which is always great fun, so that whatever happens, whatever goes wrong or goes right or whatever, I mean, I've done a lot of live shows from these studios here at London Weekend, and I remember the moments when, for instance, once, you know, we suddenly had a trades union leader who got furious, you know, and stood up and said, you know, there have been certain allegations made against me, and I intend to find out who the alligator is. Now, I love those moments. And another one of them said, we're not all powerful. He said, we're just helpless prawns. Wonderful new dish.
How do you see your role, though, in Breakfast Telly? Is it going to be a rather serious David Frost, or are you going to come on throwing plants and things around?
Well, basically, a bit of both. I think, because that's what I like, really, is the combination. And the thing that really excites me about Good Morning Britain and everything is that basically this is a chance to do everything. You know, I like doing serious shows. I like doing lighter shows, whether it was That Was the Week That Was, or Guinness shows, or whatever. I like the combination. I like the mixture. And on Good Morning Britain, we can do it all. You know, it'll be ad-lib, there'll be the chance to do light-hearted stuff, there'll be the chance to do serious stuff like I've done, all in one thing, you know, and in an atmosphere which is extraordinary, really, it really is. You know, the average age is under 29 of the people who work there, and there's a real buzz about the place.
So how come you fit in there if the average age is under 29? She thinks to herself, yes. Actually,
well,
to tell you the
without
truth...
me, the average age would, of course, be...
Without trying to get too close to him, I'm dying to play Neasy, really, because you talk a lot about this sexual chemistry on Breakfast Telly.
Oh, is that, well,
I mean, is that really... You didn't really say that, did you?
No, I didn't. It's a wonderful example of how things get taken out of context. I didn't mind, really, because at least it doesn't sound boring, you know, and the thought of sexual chemistry with Anna and Angela is a delightful thought, you know. But what, in fact, I said was that there are so few shows where there's chemistry between the two anchor people. And that's where it started. You know, that, I mean... As between two anchors, about the closest you get is wondering what Alistair Burnett is saying at the end of News at 10, you know, when they do that thing to show their newscasters and things.
The nice thing about it is Anna Ford will now be able to tell you.
Yes, exactly. and the mics will still be on. And I think that relationship between any of the Camden Five, you know, whether it's Parky talking to Anna or me to Angela or whoever, you know, I think that's really important, that sort of chemistry. And so then somebody said, but of course, each day you'll probably have a male host and a female host, won't you? And because, you know, the sexual chemistry is important. And I said, well, I suppose normally we would, yes. And so out of that came, and I said something like, sexual chemistry is always important. Now, out of that, a long 20-minute speech was forgotten, and of course the headline was sexual chemistry and flirting and all that stuff and so on. And so Parky was rather worried that he'd have to, you know, have sexual chemistry and flirt with Robert Key, you know. But actually it's been exaggerated, but at least it sounds like fun, and it feels like fun too.
When I say to you, what do you like at 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't mean as far as sexual chemistry is concerned. I just mean about getting up to get to your job.
Now, wasn't that self-control? That was a moment of self-control. Well, would you like to rephrase that question?
I let it stand, yes.
Well, and the... No, I mustn't. No, the thing is that basically, of course, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30, normally I'm more used to going to bed at, well, not really as late as that, but at 2 o'clock anyway. And so it is a change of style and so on. And my friends who do breakfast television in the States say, you know, that lunch becomes a candlelit meal, as it were, or whatever. And I offered Parky that we'd start a pre-lunch disco in Camden Town, because if you start work at 4 in the morning, you'd be about ready to relax, you know, about noon and so on, and get the mezzanettes in to sing and everything like that, you know. But basically, it's going to be a new style and so on. And as I said, Parky once, it's funny to have worked all these years to be in the position where you can afford to lay in bed in the morning, and now this, you know, the other way around. You know, we've done it all in the wrong order, but it's such fun that nobody minds. You know.
Well, we're all looking forward to that, naturally, very much. But if we can look back just a little bit to that was the week that was. I mean, here you are, known as Mr. TV as such. I mean, you've had enormous success, but everything always didn't go quite right, and it hasn't really gone quite right today either. But we've got a clip where you were interviewing Jerry Rubin, and this is where the Yippies kind of took over in the studio, and it's a rather nice moment because I see you in a different context altogether.
It was on LWT, that was, yes, indeed. And it was the time they all had these buttons. Jerry Rubin was on the show, and he had buttons and saying, you know, free the Chicago 7, and, you know, and so on. A friend of mine in the States had one that said, free the Indianapolis 500, which I thought was a nice thought. But in fact, and they had done it very well, because what they'd done is they'd organised, you know, and they'd got about 20 or 30 people into the studio and so on, and then they came down with their own cameras to record it for alternative television or whatever, and then the swearing, and then I was saying, no, I think you're pathetic and so on. And then we got the second half of the show to do, and the studios was a shambles, you know, rather like
today, yes.
And the thing was that, luckily, I said, well, why don't we take 2 of the cameras through into the other studio, because the second half of the show was an interview with a guy called Robert Ardrey about a book called The Territorial Imperative, which was ironic, since the territorial imperative was theirs rather than ours, in fact. But again, it comes back to the live thing. It was terrific, you know, to have to cope with that sort of situation.
On the other hand, it was a strange situation, because for years you had more or less been seen as a scourge of establishment, and here you were actually, the role reversed, you were being seen as establishment, which must have been a different situation for you.
Well, yes, I don't think it was really time with that particular clip to ever work out what role one was playing at all. Other one wanted them to shut up as quickly as possible and so on. But I was really just, in a sense, I suppose one stays as much of a reformer as ever, but I guess your views, it's not your views change, but new views come along and so on. But I mean, I remain feeling as strongly about issues as I did in the days of That Was the Week That Was and so on. But I don't agree with, you know, some of the campaigns that go on. And these guys were over the top, but my goodness, you know, nobody switched it off.
Well, it certainly was a highlight of sorts, I should imagine. But looking back over the hundreds of people that you've interviewed, I mean, certainly the one that stands out in my mind is Richard Nixon, is that coup of getting those interviews, you know, at that particular time. Is that also one for you?
No, absolutely. I'd pick that as the most fulfilling, because I mean, there have been a lot of memorable ones of different kinds, but Richard Nixon for 24 hours over a month, and everybody saying it would be impossible, and then the reaction to the first programme and so on, and the research for a year before it and all of that sort of thing. And this man, we peeled off more layers and got more admissions than anyone expected, but he still remained sort of an enigma in so many ways. He would so often say things that he completely ignored the dramatic irony of what he was saying. He would say it very seriously. I remember the first time I went to meet with him, and I knew that although he had no small talk, which is odd for a statesman, but he didn't, nevertheless he thought you shouldn't talk about the subject under discussion for 5 minutes, protocol dictated small talk, and he didn't have any. So, clutching at straws, there'd been something about Brezhnev in the paper that morning in the Los Angeles Times, so I mentioned that, and he looked very seriously and he said, oh, he said, I wouldn't want to be a Russian leader. They never know when they're being taped. It's extraordinary. I mean, and on another occasion, I was talking to him about the upcoming interviews, and I said I had to go back to Los Angeles to do a television program, and he said, are you getting paid? Because he was always obsessed about it. And I said, yes, I certainly am. He said, well, make sure you pay your taxes, otherwise you can get in a lot of trouble. I mean, you know, tax advice from Richard Nixon, you know, I mean, you know.
You mentioned earlier on that you like the variety of work these days, not only, you know, the serious role that you've been in terms of Nixon interviews, but also the variety of the Guinness programme at the moment. I'm still trying to get over that man with the fingernails.
I know, he's captured everybody's imagination in the most extraordinary way. I mean, 52 inches or whatever they were, and I mean, they must impede him doing almost anything, you know. I mean, it's a revolting thought, really, isn't it? It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, an underwater violinist and people with these specialities, they are extraordinary. A guy next week who's been struck by lightning 5 times, you know, I mean, and things like, I mean, inexplicable, really.
But do you ever feel that in some ways that undermines all that serious, you know, world political stuff that you've done over the years?
No, I love variety and diversity, as we all do in our lives, and switching from one thing to another. And although people like to pigeonhole you and like there to be one word that describes it, I would much rather surprise people by popping up and doing something else, and that's much more fun, much better for the adrenaline. I enjoy it much more. It keeps you fresh and so on, and means you approach everything. So 3 hours working on one sort of thing is a relaxation from 3 hours working on something else. You know, I love that diversity, and I think it tunes you up. I mean, and makes you better at both things, not always doing the same thing.
Well, may I say that you popped on today and you surprised us enormously by your entrance, and it's been smashing having you. Thank you very much. David Frost.
Literally smashing. Literally smashing.